This is my tier list for the best top lane champs to play in low elo. Low elo here is going to be the bottom 50% of players, so everyone from Iron up through approximately Gold 4. And I know there's a big skill difference at the two extremes, but I think anybody in the bottom 50% of players is making at least a few major mistakes. The biggest mistake tends to be a lack of game knowledge, and that's everything from knowing when to split versus group, knowing what to build, all the way down to not knowing what your opponent's skills are, or at least an approximate cooldown on what their skills are. Other mistakes are the inability to CS at better than 5 CS per minute. The amount of even gold players who CS so poorly is just mind blowing to me. And I'm not trying to insult anybody because when I started out, I spent a year and a half in the bottom 50% of players. So I get it. League is not an easy game and there's so much to learn. But those are some of the mistakes. Another major mistake is just being really, really bad mechanically, like not knowing how to take trades or all ins or really anything regarding fighting. So I judge these top 30 most played champions based on a few things. Some of them are, do they just have a good win rate in low elo? Can they CS well? And more importantly, do they teach you? Because there are champions where Riot has said if you play a lot of Singed, you get worse at League of Legends. Like, you play a lot of games of Singed, you will be worse than a player who just took like a 1 month break from League. Maybe that's not an exact quote, but there are so many champions that actually teach bad habits. And I, of course, recommend against playing those. Riven is a prime example because I think the more that you focus on the minute details like animation canceling, the less focus you are giving to learning actual fundamentals of League, like wave management, overall macro, and everything about trading when you're on any champion that's not Riven. So I'll be starting with Kante. He is the most played champion this game, this patch, and he has an insane win rate in high elo. He is really strong in pro play. And for low elo, he goes in the refund tier, as in grab that refund token and get your money back. If you do not have more fun playing Kante than any other champion, you should not be playing him because he is really bad in low elo. People do not understand how to play him mechanically, and they're not winning games. On top of that, I think that he takes so much focus mechanically that similarly to Riven, you are not mastering the fundamentals of League when you are focusing on his constant skill shots, his never ending button smashing. Atrox is pretty similar to Kante. He's going to go in the don't tier for me. I just think that lower elo players aren't able to play him well. Another thing both of these champions have in common is they're unforgiving. Once you fall behind, you are useless. It is so hard to get back in the game if you're down a level or two, down half an item to even more as the game goes on. I just don't think that these are good champions for newer players or lower elo players to be trying to learn the game. Jax has been the third most played top laner this patch, and he's the first one that goes into the good tier for me. He's got a lot going for him. He is great at setting up ganks and great at escaping from ganks. So whichever jungler shows up, Jax is actually going to be pretty useful. On top of that, he doesn't really have weak points. He's good in the early game. He's good in the late game. He can CS well. He has an auto attack reset that is great for new players to learn the basics of an auto attack reset, how you can get 2 autos off in the time it would normally take for like 1.2 autos. So he's great. His only weaknesses, I think, and then Garen is going to be the first champion in the perfect tier. He has the highest win rate in low elo at 54%. He is extremely forgiving. If you take a bad trade early, you can back off, and thanks to your passive, you'll regen really quickly. He's great at staying even if you feel like you're less skilled than your opponent. On top of that, because he's so simple mechanically, no skill shots, you can learn macro super well. You can focus on where do I want this wave? Do I need to crash this now? Should I be going somewhere else? A lot of great things about him, and he's fantastic at CSing. once you have Stride Breaker, you should be able to clear the entire wave except for a cannon with just your E and Stride Breaker. So if you're CSing better than your opponent, you're obviously getting a whole lot more gold. I just think he's great. And he has really high move speed because, well, first of all, his Q, but more importantly, you're building Stride Breaker, you're building other movement speed items. He's just great. Darius is pretty similar to Garen for me, but I think he doesn't teach as much, and he's got a way worse win rate at only about 49%. But mainly, my main complaint about him is that he's such a lane bully that he doesn't teach you how to be more passive in matchups. If you fall behind on Darius, your game's pretty much over for you. But when you're in lane, like 95% of the time, you are the aggressor and you don't learn as much about backing off, playing safe. So I think that lack of learning is just going to drop him down to the good tier. I'd still recommend him. He's still pretty simple mechanically. He can win a lot of 1v2s. I think he's good. I just don't think he's perfect. Yone for me is going to go in the don't tier. He actually does have a decent win rate in low elo, but that's because even in low elo, he's mostly played by one tricks. I think he's just too difficult mechanically for a lot of people to understand him. He's not horrible. He can escape from a lot. He can chase people down from a mile away. He has his strong points, but people in low elo who are lacking mechanics are just going to fall so far from his potential that I wouldn't recommend him. I would recommend somebody who you can master in like 5 games. And I use master very loosely. But Garen has a similar win rate in bronze as he does in diamond. And that's a good thing for low elo players. Yone, on the other hand, has a great win rate, or at least a decent win rate in high elo, and a terrible win rate in low elo. And that's just one more reason why you shouldn't be playing him. Riven, I mentioned already, she's in the refund tier because she's got so many unique mechanics that don't translate to other champions. When you're spending all of your focus on mechanics, you're not spending your focus on learning macro, learning enemy champions. I think that she's kind of a bait. Jace for me is going to go in the don't tier. He's extremely difficult mechanically, and I have a lot to say about range champs. I think that range champs in general are just bad for low elo players learning things. It's like Darius. If you're constantly the aggressor, you're not learning like half of the game. And if you get spam ganked, even if you're on a range top, you're not going to win that 1v2. And you start saying, oh, I'm behind. I am not good at playing from behind because 95% of the time I play as the aggressor. So I think that lack of learning from a complete lane bully makes you learn the fundamentals of League more slowly. Up next is Renekton. He's going to be the first in the fine tier. He's got a lot going for him. For pretty much his entire existence, he's been considered a great blind pick who's difficult to counter. But what I don't like is that he's kind of a go-in champ, and then he doesn't always win that 1v1. Like, if you're Darius or Garen and you can stick on an enemy champ, or Jax, if you can stick on an enemy champ, you're going to win that 1v1. Renekton does not necessarily win that, but a lot of low elo players have the mentality of I'm going in and I'm not backing out until one of us is dead. And with Renekton, it's too easy to kite him. Like Jax, his jump is on a low cooldown. He has a stun. He's similar to Renekton, but I think he's got lower cooldowns and I think he's got more damage. Well, one major difference between like Renekton and Darius is that Darius is going to take Ghost every time, and Garen is going to have Stride Breaker and more movement speed. Renekton is too easy to kite, in my opinion, and he doesn't absolutely stomp in 1v2s like a Darius might. And he's got less escapes than a Jax might. I just think that Renekton, while he's great for higher elo players, he can't execute as simply as these top 3 champs can. And that's why he's in the fine tier for me. I still think he's simple enough and you can learn a ton on him, but I just think similar playstyle but executed better, I would pick any of these 3. Gangplank is going to go in the he's going to go in the fine tier for me because he teaches a lot of good things like overall map awareness, but he also is pretty difficult mechanically. You hear people say, like, the best Fioras in the world are playing at like 95% of their potential. Gangplank, on the other hand, a fantastic Gangplank, Solar Baka, said something along the lines of he feels he's playing Gangplank to 80% of his potential. So if a guy with thousands of Gangplank games, who's worldwide known for his Gangplank, says he's not close to the full potential of Gangplank, a low elo player certainly won't be either. He's pretty forgiving in that he can farm from a distance, he can damage from a distance, he can assist other lanes from anywhere on the map. Those are his strengths. He's got his oranges to not die to a gank, but I just think that people are going to be so far from his potential. And again, I think in addition to teaching the good habits, he also teaches some bad habits. Like, I think he teaches, in addition to teaching the good habits, he also teaches some bad habits, and it's really easy to fall behind on Gangplank if you aren't good at him. So that's going to go in the good tier for me. He's, in my mind, like identical purpose to these three. Yeah, his mechanics are different. He's got almost no escape. He's got more defensive capability than these guys. And it's really all about his W. You want to use it at the right time, and then you win a fight. But in general, he's a lot like these guys. I think he's a solid pick. If you're going to pick any of them, go for it. They're all good. Fiora for me is perfect, and not only that, she is the number one most perfect, so she's actually going to be the only champion above Garen for me. She has a lower win rate, but I think that she's amazing because she's got a pretty low skill floor. Like, it's easy to do the basics on Fiora. It's easy to get Q damage off. It's easy to repost a lot of skills, but she also scales up so well with having a high skill ceiling that the more you play her, the more you improve. Like, at a certain point, you're going to get the Garen mechanics down, and then you're just improving your macro. Fiora, on the other hand, I think you consistently improve your mechanics, but at the same time, her mechanics aren't so intense that you're not also improving your macro at the same time. On top of that, you learn the cooldowns of your enemies better on Fiora than anybody else because you're constantly thinking, what do I need to repost and when will I need to repost it? So I think that she's great for learning every single matchup in the game, and I love her. Ornn's going to be good for me. He and Malphite, I'm going to throw Malphite in perfect because I can talk about them both similarly. These guys are great because even if you fall behind, they're so forgiving. Your ultimate is going to change every team fight. You enable your teammates to carry you. The differences here are that I think Malphite is just easier and he can CS better. If Ornn wasn't so bad at CSing, he would be perfect as well. He would be one of my most recommended champs. The problem with Ornn is when you're under tower, you're really going to struggle to get CS. Your skills aren't great for killing minions. You don't have any executes. Your auto attacks are not the best for last hitting minions. So, with the exception of his CSing, I think that he's really, really such a good champion. Malphite, you can learn a lot. You're going to learn a lot about team fighting and target selection because he's one of those champs who can get on anybody and nobody can stop you. His ult is unstoppable. It's fantastic. You learn here's when to get on the back line. Obviously, if your team is 2 screens away, you're not going to want to ult in. That sounds really simple, and yet people go in anyway. So you'll learn pretty quickly, I can get to the priority targets at any time. When do I want to get to them? I think that's a great thing to learn. You learn a lot about mana management because if you start queuing every time it's off cooldown in lane, you're going to have no mana in 2 minutes. So I think he teaches a lot. I think he's forgiving. He's an all-around solid champ, and Ornn is right behind him. Similar role, slightly harder for low elo to pull off. Sion's also going to be good for me. I think he's kind of an all-rounder champ, with the caveat that you are not an EU challenger player. It is not worth 10 deaths to get that second tower. Minimize your deaths. You don't have to be a complete scaredy cat, but you should try to play him like a pretty normal champion. Don't fall for the bait builds. It's not all about stacking health, even though it's fun to see numbers go up. if you're playing Scion correctly, he's good. Camille's going to be don't. Let's see. We've done 1, 2, 3 of the quad stompers with the 4th one coming up. Fiora is the only quad stomper I recommend to everybody. So the quad stompers are these 4 ladies of top lane. I'm going to throw Irelia in there too now. She's also don't. The 4 ladies of top lane are all pretty mechanically intense with extremely high skill ceilings in that you can still be learning and improving after hundreds of hours with them. So these two are actually very different in their goals. But Camille wants to take really quick trades, and I think that low elo players are terrible about that. I talked about it earlier. A lot of low elo players want to go in. I was talking about like Renekton, Darius especially. They want to go in and they say, I'm not leaving until one of us is dead. That is not how you play Camille. But that's how low elo players like to play a lot of their champs. So you can't do that with Camille. You need to take quick trades. A really simple way to look at it is, okay, we're going to see Conqueror, sometimes Grasp, but we're going to see Conqueror, 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 Lethal Tempo, Conqueror or Lethal, probably Conqueror. Those are champs who want to take really, really long trades or all-ins versus Camille has Grasp. That means you're not getting stronger 3 seconds into a fight. It's all about using your cooldowns and then getting out. So Camille just has a different playstyle that I don't think low elo players are good at. So I don't recommend her. Also, the mechanically intense part is a downside. Irelia, similarly, I think too mechanically difficult for a lot of low elo players and really unforgiving. If you fall behind, you have no shot, and it's not a great pick. It's also hard to keep the wave where you want it as Irelia because you feel like you need to be auto-attacking and killing minions. But if you ever mess up a Q and you've pushed the wave, you might just be stuck out there watching your opponent freeze on you. I'm going to talk a lot about freezing with Elaoi. I almost put her in don't, but Elaoi's going to go in fine because I think that all of her weaknesses are thankfully offset by your opponents being unable to capitalize on them. Elaoi is somebody who's going to push the wave a lot and be very skill reliant. So if you miss your soul grab or if you use your ults at a bad time, you're very vulnerable for the next however many seconds are on your cooldown. The only good thing is that in low elo, your opponents aren't going to know how to play against you, and you're going to get them running into you, into your ult all the time, and you're going to win that 1v4. The problem is if you're not strong with macro, but you are decent mechanically, yeah, that can get you to gold, and it probably won't get you any higher because once you're outclassed in macro, you're just going to be pretty unable to win games. And Elaoi is not great at wave management. I mean, you can crash with Elaoi a lot, but you're going to unintentionally push the wave a lot too. And if your opponent is even half decent, they can freeze against you. So I think Elaoi is one of those champs that can work fine in low elo if you're a low elo player. But unless you genuinely improve your overall game sense and all of your fundamentals, you're not going to get that high. Versus these champs, I think with less improvement, you can climb higher. Nasus is the final perfect champion for me, and the number one reason for that is because of how good he is at CSing. You can CS forever, you can sustain forever, as long as you're not up against like a range top who's just 5 times better than you. You're going to be able to keep your health up. You don't really die to all-ins very easily because you have your ult and your wither. Like if a Darius tries to go on you, you just wither him and you ult and you walk away. Even a Malphite, if he can't one-shot you, what comes next for him? Nothing. So as Nasus, if you can survive the first few levels, get some good cooldown reduction, and then start stacking, you're just going to have more gold than your opponent most games because in low elo, your opponent's going to be missing a ton of CS and you're going to be getting free CS every time your Q is up because it's like impossible to miss that. So just for the economy, Nasus is really high. I also think that he's a pretty forgiving champ because he has a lot of lifesteal and he scales really well even if you're down 2 kills. Mordekaiser is going to go in fine for me. I think that his lack of mobility and his pretty minimal CC just aren't great for learning the game and for translating to other champs. he's almost like a moving AP tower for me. Like once you get on somebody, they can't get away from you, and yeah, you do huge damage. But a lot of these champs it's actually hard to get on them. And maybe I'm a little biased against Mordekaiser. He just doesn't feel like a great pick to me. He's not super difficult mechanically, but I don't think he's a great pick for low elo. Tom Kench is going to go in good. He's kind of like Malphite and Ornn in that you can be tanky and you can do a lot of damage and you can get on their back line and you can help your teammates. I just think that his team fight's not as good as these two, but where he makes up for it is he's really good at CSing. His passive puts more damage on his auto attacks, which is fantastic. If you're somebody who struggles with CSing, it's great that your autos now do considerably more damage. So I think he's a solid pick. Anybody who can CS reliably and isn't insanely mechanically intense, I recommend. Rumble for me is going to go in don't. He's got too many unique mechanics, especially his overheating bar. And I think that it's super difficult for players to play around that. I think you're going to spend too much time like looking down at your bar, like trying to do quick math. And when you get to late game, he's just an alt bot. On top of all of that, he's naturally going to push the lane. And sure, you can win lane, but I don't think that that translates very well into winning games. So I just recommend against him. And Gnar is going to take those bad things from Jace and from Rumble. Your teammates are not going to play around your rage bar. You might just have transformed back from Mega Gnar into Mini Gnar, and your opponents are going to say, okay, it's time to go in. Or, sorry, well, your opponents will say that, and they'll be correct. But also your allies are going to say that, and you're going to be like, oh, great, now I'm useless. Now I'm like I'm going to do the damage that a level 3 Kog'Maw would do because I don't have my ult available. You'll also learn the bad habits of being a ranged top, which high elo players can be geniuses and pull it off perfectly. But I think in low elo, it just teaches you bad habits. So I say, don't play Gnar. Gwen's going to be fine. I know she's pretty different from Mordekaiser, but they're sort of paired in my head, and they put out a ton of damage with a little bit of CC, and I just think that there's better options. I think if you are going an AP top, I would rather you go an AP top with a lot of CC. Malphite and Ornn are my top picks for that. I mean, yeah, you can learn a lot on Gwen, but I think the best picks are the champions where you can learn a lot and improve a lot very quickly. So she's just fine. Akali is going to go in the refund tier. She might be the only champ where I see low elo players misuse every single one of her skills, end up with 0 energy, and die. She's actually super difficult. She has got a bad win rate in every single elo, and I don't think she's worth picking up. If she ever gets a big buff, I might change my mind, but for now, she's in the refund tier. Tryndamere goes in good. He's pretty similar to like Jackson Darius. He's decent at getting on people and doing a lot of damage. People like to call him a walking slot machine or say that he's a cheesy top. And while those insults do have some merit, I think that the simplicity of his mechanics and his ability to do damage at any point in the game, unless you're up against like a Malphite, make him a solid champion. Sure, if you fall behind, he's not as forgiving as some champions, but he's got enough sustain. His ultimate is going to keep you alive no matter what when, for 5 seconds when you get it. So I think he's a fine pick. Volibear for me, I meant fine as in good, but Volibear for me is actually going to go in fine. He's got a lot of damage. He would be really, really solid for me if he didn't naturally push the lane. When his little lightning bolts are striking all the minions and slow pushing the wave, I think that's a huge weakness of him. And all of these champs, you can learn really good wave manipulation on. Volibear, you cannot. So for that alone, he's dropping down to fine, despite him being able to be a great tank or huge damage. I just think that him naturally pushing the wave is so bad that it undoes all the things that would have put him in good or perfect. Kale for me is going to go in don't. It's because she's ranged, and it's because she early game. I mean, she's just not teaching good things about like when either jungler shows up. When you get ganked on Kale, what can you do other than flash and give yourself a tiny speed up? You've got almost no disengage. You've got a little Q, right? That's a small slow. And when your own jungler comes, again, all you have is a small speed up and a small slow. I don't like her lack of CC. I don't like her minimal mobility. She's just like basically an AD carry or an AD carry mage type thing. Like, I think that she's pretty unique from the other champions. I don't think that she teaches fundamentals. I don't think you should be playing a range top. I think that she's too weak early. And this might sound weird, but I think she's too strong late. And that there's not much to learn when you do make it to level 16 because you just smack everybody as long as you don't get CC'd. So I think she's one of the worst champions to learn the game on. Pantheon for me is going to go in don't. And the number one reason is that I just think he works better as a mid laner. He's an AD caster with an ultimate that can get him like halfway across the map. It's not global, so you can't go from top to mid or bot. You can only go from top to mid. I mean, you could go base to mid anyway, or base to bot. I just think he's better suited for the mid lane. If you really love him, he's fine. He's not insanely difficult mechanically, but I just don't think he should be played top. And finally, Olaf, the 30th most played champion this patch in the top lane, is going to be good. One thing he's lacking is that when he falls behind, he's pretty useless. It's really hard to play Olaf from behind because you just feel like you do no damage and you get killed immediately. He also has very poor disengage. His ultimate will last forever as long as you're attacking or using Reckless Swing, but if you're running away, it expires in 3 seconds and then you just die anyway. So I think Olaf, he's kind of like Darius in that you do great when you're the aggressor, you do great when you're ahead, and when you're behind, you feel a little bit useless. I think you can learn a lot on Olaf, and I definitely think he's a good pick, but he's probably lower than these. He doesn't really have bad matchups, so that is a plus for him. The problem is if you're in a skill matchup where the better player wins and you start losing, then you're kind of out of luck. So for a lot of reasons, I think Olaf is a decent pick, but he's not one of my most recommended. If I could recommend one pick to anybody, I would say any of these. All of them CS well. All of them are useful later in the game. All of them can split push or team fight. Nope, I lied. Malphite. If you're split pushing on Malphite, you are griefing. But okay, 3 of them can choose between splitting and team fighting, and Malphite is useful no matter what he does. So I'd say like pick 2 of these, probably Malphite and an AD champ so that you have one of each. If you find Malphite boring, maybe pick one of these 3 and Ornn. Anyway, yes, you can make anything work except for Kante. Nope, except for Kante and Akali. But I just think that these are the easier champs to put in work on. So thanks for watching. If you disagree with me, feel free to leave that in the comments. It'd be nice if you did it politely, but I know that we have different opinions and some champs are easier for certain people and hard for others. So feel free to say whatever you think. And if you want to know about any other champs that weren't in the top 30 most played, feel free to ask that. I have mained probably 12 of these 30 champions at some point, and I have mastery level 5 plus on about 20 of these 30 champions. I've played all of them. I'm more experienced on some than others. So I'd like to think that what I say has some validity. And for a year and a half, I was in the bottom 50% of players. So I spent a lot of time down there. I understand how that play style works. And different people have different weaknesses, but I see how low elo generally works. It took me a lot of years to make it into the top 5% of players, and I learned a lot in all categories. So thanks again for watching.